What's good in the hood? What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you guys another video. Today I'm bringing you guys a video to catch up on Lupinranger versus Patoranger. These episodes include episodes 44 through 46. Yep. So we're getting very far into the season. These episodes were varying. Some were really good, some were okay. 44 definitely being the best of them. 46 being pretty good, and 45 being probably the weakest of them because it was the weirdest episode, but it wasn't a bad episode, just a really weird one. But we'll get into all that. So episode 44 was the last episode before the Christmas episode, which is called The Truth Found. This episode continues where 43 ended, where we ended up learning that, Noel is not human, he's connected to the Ganglers, and we end up learning the whole story behind what's going on there. We learned this from Kagori. Kagori actually explains at one point, because they end up finding Noel and, presenting him with a message from Good Striker that they want to speak to him. And what happens is that Kagori explains to them eventually that, yes, he's not a human, and the reason why is because, several years ago, there was a point, 1,000 years ago, they ended up having the the Ganglers and the humans used to live together in the Gangler world. But what happened is that eventually a Gangler wanted to rebel against the humans and wanted to take over the world. And what happened was that the Ganglers and the humans separated from each other, and so the humans went to their world and the Ganglers came over in smaller droves to the human world. So they ended up having this split. Now, what did end up happening as far as Noel goes is that Noel, yes, he grew up having this connection where he had this lineage to this Gangler race, but also this Gangler human kind of connection. So there was this combination idea, and the thing is that Noel actually grew up as an orphan. He grew up on the streets, and eventually he was taken in by Arsène Lupin. And what happened is that as this orphan, he grew up learning about, the Lupin collection items and living with Arsène Lupin, and he grew to appreciate him and really care for him. Eventually, one day, the Ganglers came in and broke into Arsène Lupin's place and decided to take the Lupin collection items and ended up giving them to the Ganglers, which they ended up spreading out across the land, leading to the separation of the Lupin collection items that were originally all together with Arsène Lupin. Again, what ends up happening is that in this episode, that eventually Arsène Lupin is killed by Degranio, and what we end up learning is that that's who Noel has been wanting to save this whole time. He's been wanting to save Arsène Lupin because he's had this familial connection to him, and he's wanted to bring back the father that's his adopted father, basically. So we end up learning about that, and this helps Kyrie and the others basically learn that, he's really a good guy. He's actually doing stuff that's very similar to what they're doing, and he's not a evil person. The Patorangers don't really understand everything, and that's why they're kind of attacking him. And the thing is that their friend, or at least the friend that they think that they have, Satoru, the guy that ended up blaming Noel for the Japanese headquarter scandal and all that stuff. Well, there's a number of things that are happening in this episode that kind of point to him being suspicious. One thing being the fact that Kichiro remembers that in the past, he would always Satoru would mention always listening to the music to understand people's feelings. And the thing is that he doesn't care about feelings. It's very clear in this version. He doesn't care about feelings. And on top of that, he eventually leaves the place, and we end up seeing that he leaves his music player behind, which has no music on it. So two things right there. First of all, he doesn't care about feelings. It ends up being pretty obvious because Kichiro mentions the fact that he's trying to understand how Noel feels, and he's been trying to do that for a while, and how other people feel. And Satoru doesn't really treat it like it's a big deal. And then the music, since there's no music, that's another thing because he always had music. So those kind of points were very significant. There was also the fact that eventually they ended up discovering that the headquarters weren't from the Japanese headquarters. They were from the French. They were French headquarter details that actually were being all strewn across to make it look as if Noel was this bad guy. So what we end up seeing is that they're trying to then prove this, and they end up confronting Satoru, the three of them. And what happens is that they reveal the truth, and Noel even realizes this truth, and he ends up helping them out against Satoru. And he realizes that, he's been making all this up, and they actually end up having this point where he uses a Lupin collection item to make them point their weapons at each other. And it's clear that he can't be who he is, and Noel proves this by throwing a card at him, which reveals his true identity, which is a gangler. Yes, this whole time he was a gangler. And the thing is that they wonder, well, what happened to Satoru? How do you even know about him? And if you changed your voice to his, how would you know this? And the thing that they learn is that the reason why they had this form is because he's likely a dead body. He's dead now. And what that means is that most of the ganglers that we've had disguises for have been originally dead bodies. And if you remember, and this kind of connects to a lot of things, you have to remember when, early into the season, there was a whole story about how there were several people that went missing. Those people were the disguises that the Lupinrangers and the Patorangers have been fighting, because those are real people that ended up dying, and the ganglers ended up using the human bodies as disguises so they can blend in with society and use their gangler abilities to affect the humans and do things to their advantage. It's very interesting, and it makes a lot of sense in a way why that would work, just based on the whole gangler story and their connection to the ganglers and the humans. There's a lot of connections and logic behind why that is the way it is. So eventually they do end up having to fight this gangler, who they now have a real reason to fight him, because he most likely killed their good friend, who was the previous Patoranger Nigo. So what happened? Patoranger Nigo. So what happens is that we end up seeing as well that Noel uses his super form, which is cool, and he fights alongside the Patorangers, which use Patoranger Ugo, and they manage to destroy this gangler. This gangler doesn't really have his name mentioned more than maybe once, I think, which his name, by the way, is what's his name? He is Norisma Shibons, and he is basically based off of a seahorse. So what happens is that he gets destroyed, and they manage to summon for this episode. They managed to use a combination which was pretty brand new when we got to see it this episode. It was actually the Siren Patoranger Kaiser, which is the first time that we get to see that combination used, where the Siren Striker is used with the Patorangers versus vehicles. We don't know if they're going to have it with the Victory Striker. That would be great, but as of now, we only know Siren Striker is going to combine. So anyway, we do see that combination used, and we do see Ex-Emperor being used against this gangler, and they manage to defeat it, and they rejoice over that, but they are still kind of upset because of the fact that they learn of this truth behind what's really been happening to some of these people that have been dying. These people have been dying, and then their bodies are being used as basically, costumes for these people, for these ganglers that are evil. So it's really interesting. Now, what we do end up seeing as well is that Zamigo is now plotting things, and we see that, I believe, in this episode. Now, as far as 46 goes, 46 is a very different episode. It's called, 45. 45 is called Looking Forward to Christmas. Now, Christmas episodes tend to be more comedic, more goofy, more silly. Sometimes they go for the, sometimes they do the whole, kind of it's not a flashback, it's basically a look back at the season. They always do these around this time of year, where they'll have sort of a kind of a montage. That's the word I'm thinking of. It's a montage of different things in the show, whether it be weapons, mechas, characters, stories, you name it. That's been a constant thing. Even monsters that they fought over time and major triumphs and losses. Super common for Kamen Rider and also for Super Sentai to do this. So the thing was that normally they do it around the Christmas episode. They actually move it to the New Year's episode, which they do. So they do both. For the Christmas episode, what we do end up seeing is that the big thing that they're all focused on is chicken. If you don't know Japan, when it comes to Christmas time, what they eat is chicken. Usually it's most people recognize it as the time for people to eat KFC, because KFC is very, very popular in that part of the world around this time, and they tend to get like these huge like chicken dinners that are made from, you know, KFC chicken buckets, or it could just be from a store, but it's always popular at this time. But we have this gangler that's a gangler that decides to make all the chicken places, instead of serving chicken, serve salmon, and the gangler is supposed to be like this dead salmon that has like tomatoes on it, and it looks interesting. Anyway, he tries to make these businesses sell salmon instead of chicken, and when the people put back the chicken, then he comes back and he says, no, you can't have this. And the reason why is because this gangler has like the dumbest Lupin collection item ever, honestly, I'd have to say, because the ability of it is to make it so that he can smell chicken. He has like an enhanced sense of smelling chicken. And it's just like the dumbest thing ever, the fact that that's what his Lupin collection item does. Now, anyway, what does end up happening, I mean, it's so silly, but what we do end up seeing is that Noel ends up having to travel to France to pick up first a cake for Christmas, but then he also ends up having to go back to pick up chicken as well for Christmas, because they're going to be celebrating with some kids. And what happens is that they end up having to fight, they end up trying to lure the gangler out by having Toma cook some chicken, and Noel and Sequoia are the two that are all about the chicken. As far as Tsukasa and Kachiro, they're not really involved too much in this episode. Kachiro probably the least, but the Lupin Rangers are definitely involved, and they're all going to be invited to this Christmas party. Now, what we do end up seeing is that eventually when the gangler is lured out, they end up having to fight him. He uses all these different fish attacks, and he describes their own special salmon that they relate to, and it's just interesting. Eventually, they do manage to defeat the gangler by having Noel and Sequoia do a finishing attack with Noel's super form and managing to destroy the gangler. So then the gangler's turn big, and he ends up asking Gochi for help, so she ends up turning some of the Portermen big, and what happens is that he also ends up giving each of the Portermen salmon swords, which are swords basically like they're used which are salmon that is used like swords to battle the Lupin Rangers. And what happens is that we end up seeing the Lupin Rangers use I believe they use Siren Lupin Kaiser and Victory Lupin Kaiser, as well as Lupin Magnum with red and blue versus vehicles for the Lupin Rangers, as well as, sorry, is it red and blue? No, it's yellow and blue. And we also end up seeing at the same time, they use Ex-Emperor Slash and Ex-Emperor Gunner. They use this whole combination. They even have a sleigh effect where the three of them are used, and they end up dressing up, like where Victory Lupin Kaiser is Santa, and then Ex-Emperor Slash and Lupin Magnum are supposed to be the reindeer. So they actually dress up, which is kind of cool. And even the Lupin Rangers dress up, which this uniform definitely works with the Lupin Rangers. Like the Christmas outfits do work. Sometimes when a team dresses up as like Santa or even the reindeer on top of their suits, it doesn't always look great. This actually does look pretty good. It fits pretty well. So that's kind of nice. But anyway, they do manage to save Christmas. They have their Christmas party, and it turns out that Kachiro learns that there's a connection between the lost people and Kairi, Umika, and Toma's lost people that were missing when they first started investigating them, if you remember, very early in the season. So this is all important. Now, 46 continues this story with like discovering things, and by the way, they do celebrate Christmas, which is nice and all that, But in 46, we get to see a kind of game show situation, which is also sort of this montage episode that I've mentioned before, where basically they do a whole montage representing different events in the show and representing the different mechas over the course of the series. But we also end up getting some story regarding learning about the, all the different alibis that the Lupinrangers have used to kind of trick the Patorangers this whole time. And Kichiro and Tsukasa are constantly coming up with these different alibis that, like, they end up disproving the fact that it couldn't be, that they had to be, it had to be them. It couldn't be some other person that was the Lupinrangers at those times. And basically they end up unraveling the truth about everything. And the thing is that Sakuya, being the one that constantly doesn't want to, he tends to be against a lot of their beliefs. He wants to protect their innocence, even though Kichiro and Tsukasa this whole entire time have been feeling that there's definitely something suspicious about the Juro trio, but now they're committed to really looking into it. Now, what we do end up seeing at the same time is that the Lupinrangers end up having to be in a special room where they have to do several different challenges to impress a porterman that has one of the safes on his head, and he has this ability where his collection item allows him to teleport things from different locations or bring things in that weren't there. So he creates this whole simulation where the first challenge was to impersonate someone. The second challenge was what was like the hardest thing you've had to. Was it that one? I think the second one was it was like the hardest thing you've had to deal with recently, which they end up bringing, like, the first challenge. Well, I just said the first challenge was like impersonating someone. So like at first we have it where Kairi tries to impersonate Toma, but he does it with like the dance, which is not good. So then instead what happens is that Noelle tries to impersonate Kichiro, and then we have for the second one that Umiko explains that they had the whole situation where they had to deal with the Lupin Magnum mission, because originally Toma tries to bring up the whole situation with the three Kagoris, which really isn't a bad thing. I mean, it was stressful, but it wasn't like the hardest thing they had to deal with or anything. Then the third one was a hidden talent, which first Noelle tries to do all of his backflips and somersaults and all of his gymnastic abilities, which isn't really hidden because everyone sees it in his regular combat anyway. What is hidden is when we end up seeing that Umika dresses up all the guys into female attire, so they become women, because we've already seen the Patorangers do this, but we never got to see it with the Lupinrangers, so we got to see the other side of it, which they definitely look better, and they even make that joke about it. Now, at the same time, we end up seeing as well, but it's weird, we end up seeing for Challenge 4 that they have to mention all the different treasures that they've gotten from all the different versus vehicles throughout the show, and what happens is that they're teleported away with this porterman, and what happens is that since Good Striker has a mind of his own, he actually manages to make the porterman strike his pose, which brings back the Lupinrangers and Noelle. And what happens is that they end up having to fight this Gangler, which they manage to do pretty easily. They do use the super form for Noelle as well, and I believe we also see Kairi use his, and they manage to destroy the Gangler. Now, what does end up happening is that the Gangler's made big. We do end up... Well, actually, I'm trying to remember now. Yeah, it should be something like that. Yeah. So, I believe that's right. I have to... honestly, it's been a little while. Anyway... They end up having to deal with this Gangler, which they end up fighting him and defeating him. And what happens is that they don't use the mecha. Actually, it's right, they don't use the mecha. But what happens is that they manage to get the Lupin collection item out of his safe, which actually is like the cryogenic tubes that they used in Time Ranger to shrink down the mutants and bring them back to the future. It's the same idea. Now, what we do end up seeing as well is that the Patorangers now agree that they're going to go look into investigating whether or not the Juror Trio is are the Lupinrangers or not, and that is something we end up seeing. Oh, that's also right. Well, this is also a New Year's episode, so they do end up they make their wish for the new year, and that's something that's very common with most New Year's episode for Super Sentai. They always do like the whole traditional like wishing and all that. Very, very common. What we do end up seeing as well in this episode is that, yes, they're going to look into it, while at the same time Sequoia is going to try to disprove the fact that they are the Lupinrangers. And in the preview, we end up seeing that Sequoia will make his effort right away, where he's going to look into things with Umika. That will be very interesting to see in episode 47. 46, by the way, I didn't get to mention the title. The title is... I'm just trying to double check it right now. It's an inescapable game, which makes a lot of sense because they end up into this game, which this game is kind of a reference to, like, I can think of one of the earlier examples of this, which was from Hurricaneger, with one of the monsters from that season, which was a pretty major monster. I forget his name right now in Japan. I'm forgetting his name in general, but he's a really goofy character. I'm sure a lot of people would know who I'm thinking of. I'm just forgetting his name right now. But anyway, it should be interesting to see where things go. There's supposedly going to be 5 more episodes. The rumors are that it's going to be ending with episode 51. And then what's going to happen is that they're going to have a couple of weeks of special episodes where they're going to feature like 5 Rangers from different... 5 Super Sentai members from different seasons. They're going to have... the Pink Tokyuja member. They're gonna have Tokyu. I think she's not Ichi. Nigo Sango. I think she's like Nigo or Sango. And we're gonna also have like one from Ninja, one from Gokaiger. And then like 2 others that I'm forgetting. Yeah. I know. Stinger's one of them from Q-Ranger. We're going to have Captain Marvelous for Gokaiger. And we're going to have Takaru from Ninja. Who am I forgetting? It has to be someone... 142. I don't remember. I forget if they have someone for either Go Busters or someone else. I'm forgetting right now, but no. It's someone from Juoger. That's who it is. Yeah, they're gonna have someone from Juoger. That's the 5th one. But they're gonna have these specials where they're gonna fight several different monsters from different series, and it's gonna last a couple of weeks until they release Real Soldier, which is the next Super Sentai series, which is releasing mid-March. Yes, very late release date, but I haven't been able to talk about this, so I'm mentioning it now. I'm looking forward to Real Soldier. Very, very cool. We already know that the first 5 members are gonna be red, blue, black, green, and pink. So it's going back to the Q-Ranger, the Q-Ranger colors, which, and it's also going to be a dinosaur kind of night mishmash combination thing. So that's something that's important to remember. People were talking about the whole night thing. It's night, but it's also really more of dinosaurs, and the mechas are really based around dinosaurs as well. Interesting ones as well, but... And it's also very early that they're doing this, but we'll end up having to wait and see how the show works out. And I'm very curious to see what the length of the season is, just because of the fact that since it's releasing so late, will this season be shorter, or will they try to make it last a similar length to past seasons? I don't know, because they're releasing it so late. But we'll have to wait and see. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I'd love to know your guys' opinions about this episode, these 3 episodes. Which one was your favorite? I found, again, 44 was probably the best of them, but each one had their good parts in it, and each one had something important to it. But there's 5 more episodes supposedly left. No more mechas, I don't think, are happening. Maybe we'll get like one more combination. But in these next couple episodes, I do know for a fact that the Patarangers will finally learn the identities of the Lupinrangers. That will happen. That's a definite. That's confirmed now. So just understand that, like, anyone that was suspecting it wasn't going to happen, it's happening. It's just going to happen probably in like the next episode or so. So anyway, that's about it for me. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy771, and goodbye, guys.